Well, hi there, everybody. It is Hi there with Rabbi Leah, and I'm so glad to see all of you. Today is the third and probably final part of the program that I've been doing on mikvah. And there's so much wonderful information that I could actually spend much more time on this. But we're going to move on to some other things, hopefully. So I did talk in the first two sessions about the where mikvah came from, what mikvah means, how mikvaot are built, where one might find them, and so on. I also talked, sorry about that, my phone decided to give me a message, which I am now going to turn off. And we also talked about a little bit about in Orthodoxy, specifically how the mikveh is used. So, for men and for women before holidays, as part of ritual of nidah, purification, following a woman's menstrual cycle, and so on. So, needless to say, there isn't anything that exists in Judaism that doesn't also exist with some controversy, and mikvah is no different. So I want to talk a little bit about that as kind of an introduction to what I'm going to talk about with regard to how mikvaot are used in a more modern context. According to Orthodoxy, the mikveh is used for very specific times and purposes. And I want to emphasize that the mikveh is not a place that makes you clean if you are dirty. This isn't about getting clean. This is about becoming ritually pure. And by ritually pure, what I mean is that there are certain mitzvot that you cannot perform if you are in a condition of ritual impurity. And so you're not going there to scrub off, dirt from work that day. You are actually going there to purify yourself in such a way so that you can perform certain mitzvot. And this, when we read about some of the offerings that people were not allowed to give at the temple in Jerusalem because they were not in a ritually pure condition. These are the kinds of things I'm talking about. So within an Orthodox context, mikveh is used prior to Shabbat for men, prior to holidays, following certain kinds of emissions from the body, following a woman's menstrual cycle, and so on. Okay, very specific times of the month and very specific holidays, festivals, and occasions. Because that is the practice, and because most of the mikvaot, at least here in the United States, are run by Orthodox communities, there are some restrictions placed on more progressive denominations of Judaism, whereby very often an Orthodox community will tell Reform Jews or conservative Jews or Reconstructionist Jews that they may not use their mikvah. So, for example, if I have a conversion candidate and as part of my requirements for conversion, that individual has to immerse in the mikvah. I request that they immerse in the mikvah. There are many Orthodox mikvaot that will not allow me, a woman rabbi, which Orthodoxy doesn't really recognize to begin with, to bring a conversion candidate who has worked with me towards conversion to immerse in their Orthodox mikvah, because they don't see me as a viable rabbi and they don't see that individual as having been trained during the conversion process in the proper way. In other words, it's got to be an Orthodox conversion to use the mikvah. So normally a Reform Jew or a conservative Jew would be allowed to use the mikvah for any of those things that an Orthodox Jew would see as viable. So as a married woman could go prior to resuming marital relations with her husband, and so on and so forth. But for conversions and for other life cycle events, very often Reform and conservative Jews are not permitted to use the Orthodox mikvahs. So what do? Well, we do the same thing that Jews did in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when we were not permitted to join certain clubs, not permitted to go into certain hospitals. We built Jewish hospitals. We built our own clubs. We started our own neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. Even universities, of course, which used to have quota systems that would not allow more than a certain number of Jews into a particular matriculating class. So we started universities that would permit Jews to come without restriction. So similarly, conservative and Reform communities and others have built community mikvahs that are open to all. And because of that, they make the rules, and they let those who are using the mikvah know for what purpose they may use the mikvah. So in these community mikvahs, I have never had a problem. You still have to contact somebody, you still have to make an appointment, as you would anyway. And there is usually a fee because it costs to keep the mikvah clean and all the supplies and everything else. And you arrange to go there, and I've never had that problem with a community mikvah. Now, there are also some synagogues that have their own mikvah, and some of them, it is actually owned and run by the synagogue and the congregation, with their doors open to others in the community who want to come, and others are on the campus of the synagogue, but not necessarily owned by the synagogue. It's supported by the community. Just happens to be housed there, like a maybe a Jewish community center or a Jewish senior center inside of a particular synagogue. So, what happens when you go to the mikvah? So I've been a number of times, and the first thing that happens is, in fact, I used to lead groups. I would take a group of women from my congregations every year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That is one of the traditional times to go to a mikvah. And so I would take a group, and we would all immerse individually, and then we would usually go out to eat dinner to talk about the experience. And for many people, it was the very first time they'd ever gone. And so, and for others, they went every year because they loved it so much. So it was a unique experience for some who had never done it. And even for those who had done it before, it always seemed to be a unique experience, because mikvah, like many other things, is a ritual to which one brings oneself. And just as you are not the same person every year, you're not the same person you were a year ago. You may have had certain life experiences that have markedly changed your life over the past year. So too, you bring those experiences with you when you go. So the first thing that happens is you go into a private room that looks much like a bathroom in your home, only usually quite a bit larger, unless you happen to have really big bathrooms in your home. And it is equipped with everything that a bathroom has. So a shower and a tub, a toilet, sinks. Um, you'll have uh, uh, soap and towels and washcloths, and kind of think about a maybe a nice hotel. There will be robes or towels, things of that nature. And your only purpose is to get cleaner than you've ever been before. And that's why I said earlier the mikveh is not a place for you to, the mikveh itself is not a place for you to get clean, because you get totally clean before you go. Your nails are supposed to be cut, no fingernail polish, no makeup. All makeup is removed. You get in the shower, you become squeaky clean, you shampoo your hair, you comb your hair so that all stray hairs are gone, and no stray hairs remain on your body. And the reason for this is that the water of the mikvah is not supposed to have any barriers between it and your flesh. And so even something as minute as a hair or a crumb of food could possibly get in the way of the waters enveloping you. Okay, so you take this incredibly diligent shower or bath, clean yourself up, Q-tips, tweezers, whatever you need, and then you are checked. Now, in an Orthodox setting, you are checked by the mikvah lady or the mikvah man, depending upon your gender, because it's always, of course, the same gender for it's whatever gender you are. And the mikvah person will kind of surreptitiously go over your body, make sure there's no stray hair or any dirt or anything like that. And then you will immerse. Now, it is a very, it's a fairly private ceremony. And I've been to mikvaot where there is where the mikvah, the aide, the witness will go into not into the mikvah with you, but into the area where the mikvah is, and will stand behind a wall that's higher. I've been to mikvaot where you're actually outside of the room in an alcove, but you can hear the person who is immersing so that they can respond to you, and so on and so forth. So, you will in the old type, not the old type mikvah, but in the traditional mikvah, if you are a woman, usually the mikvah lady stands there. She's holding up either your robe or she's holding a towel, so that when you go down into the steps, it's very modest. They're not looking at your naked body. There are 7 steps into the mikvah. And the water is warm and it feels like a bath, and it's very comforting. You walk down the 7 steps. Depending upon how tall you are, the water may come to here, the water may come to your knees, or the water may come to here. It really depends. The immersion has to be a complete immersion, and that means you have to go completely under the water so that everything is submerged, and your feet have to come up off the floor of the mikveh, the tile or whatever's on the floor of the mikveh, because you have to get your toes, your feet, and everything completely away from any surfaces. So there are 3 immersions that are done. The first one has the regular bracha, which is Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al tvila mikvah, which means to immerse or to toivel. Toiveling can also mean spinning around, but to immerse in the mikvah. And those words are recited by the person in the mikveh. They then immerse the first time, and if there is a witness watching, they will say kasher, and that means that you have done the immersion properly, and that your hair has gone under, your feet have come up, and so on and so forth. So they will watch you while you immerse. So that is the first immersion. Now, I mentioned there are 3 blessings and 3 immersions, and that also is dependent upon who is there with you. I always do 3 blessings for a conversion mikvah. The second blessing would be Shehechianu, and that would be said by the individual who is immersing. And they would then do the second dunk. And then for a conversion, the third thing I generally do is I ask that individual to say a silent prayer and to pray for really as long as they need to, and to pray whatever is in their heart, to share what they would during a silent prayer during a service, possibly, about what this experience means to them, and so on. And then they can dunk and stay under for as long as they like. And just, give me a grunt or a noise when they're up so that I know. And usually myself and whatever other witnesses are there will sing Siman Tov and Mazel Tov because it is a joyous occasion. That is for a conversion. Now, because so many communities outside of the Orthodox community have now built their own community mikvahs, we are seeing mikvaot used for many, many, many purposes, and not just the standard before the holidays, before Shabbat, and for ritual purification for marital relations, and so on. So, I'm going to give you some of those examples, and I think that you're going to find them fascinating. Before I do so, though, I want to tell you about something that occurred in Israel about 7 or 8 years ago. Yes, 2013. There is an Israeli Center for Women's Justice and Kolech. It's an organization that is committed to Orthodox Jewish feminism. And that may sound like an oxymoron at first, Orthodox Jewish feminism, but it's not. These women petitioned the Supreme Court to forbid the mikveh attendants from asking intrusive questions of the women at state-funded and operated mikvaot. And like so much in Israel, much there is run by and operated by the state. And so just like we have laws about what a potential employee may be asked about their background, so too these women didn't want to have intrusive questions asked of them by mikvaot that were not private, that were run by the state. For whatever reason, they didn't feel it was appropriate, and they didn't want that information collected. And one of the primary things they were opposed to was they wanted it to be forbidden for women to be questioned about their marital status before they immersed. So if a woman wanted to immerse, whether she was married or not, widowed, divorced, never married, they said that complaint, that was a practice that was unacceptable and discriminatory. So in 2015, there was an advocacy center that filed a complaint also with the Israeli Supreme Court on behalf of 13 Orthodox women against the chief rabbinate, believe it or not, and the Jerusalem Religious Council, insisting that women be allowed to use the mikveh according to their personal customs and without supervision, or with their own attendant if they wish. Because they said that, the directive that the court had passed in 2013 wasn't being followed. They were ignoring it and still asking women these very intrusive questions. And so women said, we want to be able to use the mikveh without a mikveh attendant. If we want to bring our own attendant, or if we want to bring our own witnesses, we want to be able to do that. And the chief rabbinate agreed. So no Spanish Inquisition before the mikveh. So what is mikveh being used for today? Well, I mentioned that mikveh is used for the purpose of ritual purification. But mikveh also marks transitionary periods in a person's life. So let's think about that for a moment. Converting from being a non-Jew to a Jew is a transition, right? Okay. Going from being a single person to a married person is a transition. Going from being a person, a woman who could conceive, be pregnant, now to having a cycle and not being pregnant is a transition. Going from a person who's involved in everyday life to doing something holy is a life transition. So in a more modern context, in a more progressive context, mikveh is being used to mark all sorts of life transitions. For preparing for marriage, preparing for a sacred service. So the Shabbat, or right before I became a rabbi, myself and a number of my classmates went to the mikveh because we felt that we were undergoing this major transition from being students and lay people to becoming ordained clergy. That was a huge life transition. And we marked that by going to the mikveh. Perhaps for those who are on a fertility journey, somebody who is about to undergo in vitro fertilization, from the mikveh to that process, preparing for conception. A young girl following her first menstruation, who is now considered a woman. Upon reaching menopause, upon no longer being able to conceive, that is a life cycle transition, a life stage as well. Many women will go during the 9th month of pregnancy before they become a parent, because becoming a parent is a huge life transition after giving birth, or even at the time of weaning a child, if they have been breastfeeding that child. So there are all sorts of reasons that one may mark that life transition with a spiritually purifying, nurturing, and healing experience, which the mikveh is. It's all of those. Challenging life transitions. Maybe somebody has been fired from a job and they found a new job, and they would go to the mikveh as a way to prepare for this new phase of life. After receiving difficult medical news, or after completing chemotherapy or some other medical treatment, following a miscarriage, and that can be done by a woman alone or by a couple, because a miscarriage, of course, impacts not just the mother, but the father as well, who was preparing to become a parent. Healing from abuse. Perhaps somebody is in a domestic abuse situation and have managed to find the courage and the strength to get out of that situation, to move on with their lives, and mikvah would be appropriate. Upon completing a period of mourning, so maybe after the period of 1 year of mourning, somebody would go to the mikvah to re-energize themselves and rejoin the community. We even see people using mikvah to celebrate in gratitude of important things that happen in their life. A joyous life transition. Maybe your last child gets married. A birthday celebration, a 40th, 50th, 60th birthday celebration. Mikvah is being used as part of the coming out process for those in the LGBTQ community who have been silent about their sexual orientation and now have come out to family, friends, and to the world, would use the mikvah. We're seeing now a lot of those who are having a gender reassignment, or those who have come out as transgender, using the mikvah as part of that transitionary process. Becoming a bar mitzvah, becoming a bat mitzvah, a parent of a bar or bat mitzvah, becoming an adult bar or bat mitzvah. I had an adult bat mitzvah when I was 37. I also went to the mikvah after I was divorced. It wasn't for several years, but I went after I was divorced. And I changed my name back to my maiden name. And when I found out that I was accepted to rabbinical school, I felt that was a huge life transition, and I used the mikvah to mark that. So what do we say at those times? Well, there is a vast, dare I say, plethora of beautiful services that are used for all of these life transitions. There's a mikvah in Newton, Massachusetts, a community mikvah called Mayim Chaim, Living Waters, and they have just an amazing array of resources for people to use for all of these life transitions and status changes that I've mentioned, along with many, many others. So if, God forbid, a woman has had a hysterectomy or a mastectomy, they will have beautiful ritual resources to use for a service like that. Or for converting a child. Let's say a couple or a person adopts a child that's not theirs biologically, and that child perhaps had parents who were not Jewish, and they want to use mikvah to convert that child officially to Judaism because you're not the biological mother or the biological father. There are resources available. And as the years go on, these resources just become more beautiful and more numerous, because Jews want to want to infuse their lives with Judaism and with meaningful Judaism. And mikvah has become one of the ways to do that. And so recognizing those major life stages and major life transitions is a way in which mikvah can be used as a spiritual resource to do that. And so I expect that someday when I retire and I go from being a full-time rabbi to being the kind of rabbi that does the motzi every once in a while and maybe does a wedding or two, that I will go to mikveh to mark that transition. So that is in 3 short sessions, everything and anything you probably wanted to know about mikveh and were afraid to ask. I just want to remind you, you can see this again today at 2:30. It's either 2 or 2:30, I don't remember. And also, don't forget Thursday is Tu B'Shvat, and I'll be doing a Tu B'Shvat program for all of you at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Lehitraot, and bye there from Chai There with Rabbi Leah. Take care, everybody. Shalom.